Hi, how's it going? Welcome to Code with Z. In today's video, we're given this array of intervals and another interval called new interval, and we gotta merge them together. Why? Because that's what LeetCode 57 insert interval is asking us to do. Now, I want you to know that I'll explain and visualize everything in the coming slides, but for the sake of reading the question, let's see what the question is actually asking us for. So as you can see, we're given an array of non-overlapping intervals called intervals. Where each interval is an array and has a starting point and an ending point. As you can see, starting point, ending point, starting point, ending point, starting point, ending point. And don't worry, I'm gonna draw these in the next slides and that's gonna make things more clear. But here it says that each interval represents the start and the end of the ith interval. And intervals is sorted in ascending order. And here we're given a new interval like this one that we have here. And this has its start and end as well. And we gotta basically insert this new one inside the previous ones without having any overlaps. And here it hints that we should actually merge it if necessary. And after everything, we're going to return the updated intervals. So let's see how we can actually solve this. If this is the intervals that we have, and this is our new interval, if we actually push this inside of this, like so, as you can see, we've pushed this inside of this array, and that gave us 1 to 3, and then 2 to 6, and then 8 to 10, and then 15 to 18. But if we check, this goes from 1 to 3, and this goes from 2 to 6. We do have an overlap, and this should actually be 1 to 6, 8 to 10, and 15 to 18. And that's because we merged these two into 1 to 6. But I don't think this actually shows what we're doing. So let me draw this for you. As you can see, we have our intervals here, and we've already pushed our new interval inside of our array. But you might say, if we actually push 2 and 6 inside of our original intervals, which is this interval that we see here, if we push 2 and 6 inside of here, that's gonna give us this. And you're completely right, because when we push something inside of our array, that thing is gonna be at the last element inside of our array. But if we actually sort this, it's gonna give us this. So don't worry about this, and let me draw this for you. All you need to know is that we're gonna push this new interval that we were given inside our intervals array, and we're gonna sort it so we can actually get to this point. At this point, we're not gonna care about the new interval because we've already taken care of that. We only need to merge any overlaps that we have here. So let me draw this. In the first interval, we're gonna go from 1 to 3, right? So we're gonna go from 1 to 3, like so. This is gonna be our starting point. Our starting point is gonna be 1, and then we're gonna go from 1 all the way to 3, and 3 is gonna be our ending point. And then we're gonna move on to the next interval. In the next interval, we're gonna have 2 and 6. So we're gonna go from 2 to 6. So from 2 all the way till 6. And then we're gonna move on to the next one. The next one goes from 8 to 10. So from 8 to 10. And then the last one is gonna go from 15 to 18. So from 15 to 18, like so. Simple as that. Now that we're done with this, we gotta see where we have overlaps. Well, if we check, we do have an overlap here. Here we go from 1 to 3, but we also go from 2 to 6. So can't we just say we should go from 1 to 6? That makes sense, right? We can literally merge these two together. But how can we check for intervals without visualizing them? And how can we actually merge them together? Well, we're gonna have one simple rule. Literally, that's the only thing we need. We're gonna say, we're gonna pick a current interval. And in the beginning, this is gonna be the first interval inside of our array. And then we're gonna have a next interval. So in the beginning, this is gonna be the first interval, and whatever is next to it is gonna be the next interval, right? Then we're gonna have our simple but yet effective rule here. We're gonna say if the start of the next interval, so the start of the next, so this is gonna be the next, and this is gonna be its start, so 2. If 2 is smaller or equal to the end of the current interval, well, the end of the current interval is 3, so is 2 smaller or equal to 3? Well, yeah. If that's the case, merge them together. Here we can actually see that in the visualization, the start of the next is actually smaller than the end of the current one. So we can basically merge them together like so. Now we have 1 to 6. But how did we actually merge them? How did we go from this to this? Well, let's check. We say when this condition is true, the end of the current interval should be equal to the maximum value between the end of the current interval and the end of the next interval. The maximum end between these two is gonna be this one. So we're gonna say we're gonna go from here all the way to here, like so. So we literally said the end of the current interval should be equal to the maximum value between 3, which is the end of the current interval, or the end of the next interval. Well, 6 is greater than 3, so we go from 1, 1, all the way till 6. And this 6 came from here, like so. And then we're gonna check for other overlaps. We're gonna say, all right, Now that we have this is going to be our current interval and this is going to be our next interval because we've already taken care of this one. And then we're going to check our simple rule here. We're going to say if the start of the next, meaning 8, the start of the next is smaller or equal than the end of the current one, well, the end of the current one is 6. So is 8 smaller or equal to 6? Not really. So we're not going to merge them and we're just going to add this to our result array. This is going to be our result array and we're going to return this at the end. So now that we've taken care of this one, we're going to move on to the next one and we're going to say this is going to be our current and this is going to be our next. Because we saw we don't have any overlaps between these two, we're going to look for overlaps between this one and the next one, like so. So we're going to check again. We're going to say is the start of the next, which is 15, smaller or equal than the end of the current? Well, the end of the current is 10, so is 15 smaller or equal to 10? Not really. So we're not going to make any merges and we're going to add this to our array like so, and then we're going to return this at the end. This is going to be our answer. Now let's code this in the simplest way possible. Alrighty, so first of all, let's define our result array that we're going to return at the end like so. And if you remember, each interval had a starting point and an ending point. The starting point was always the first index inside of that interval, and the ending point was always the second index in that interval. So we're going to say const start. This is going to be equal to 0 because this is going to give us the first index, and then const end, and this is going to be equal to 1 because that's going to give us the second index inside of each interval. And this is just to make our code more readable. So instead of saying interval at the index of 0, we're going to say interval at the index of start. So that means the start of that interval, and that's going to make our code more readable. Now we got to push our new interval inside of the intervals array that we have here. So we're going to say intervals like so dot push of new interval. And then we got to sort them. So we're going to say intervals should be equal to intervals like so dot sort. And this is just how we sort an array of arrays in JavaScript. Don't worry about it. All you need to know is that we're going to be sorting this array. Now we saw in the slides that we need to have two things, a current interval and a next interval, so we can actually compare them together. So we're going to say, let current interval be equal. If you remember, we said in the beginning, it's going to be the first interval. And then below this, we're going to have a for loop so we can actually loop through our next interval. So we're going to say for let I being equal to 1. And the reason we start from 1 is because we've already taken care of the interval at the index of 0. That's going to be our current interval. And this is going to be representing our next interval. So we're going to say for let I being equal to 1, we want to keep on looping as long as I is smaller than intervals dot length like so, and we want to increment I on each round. Here we're going to define our next interval like so, and this is going to be equal to intervals at the index of I. Below this, we're going to have our rule. We said if start of the next interval, so next interval at the index of start is smaller or equal than the end of the current interval, so current interval at the index of end, do the following. We said we have to merge them by saying current interval at the index of end should be equal to math.maximum between current interval at the index of end or next interval at the index of end. And this is going to take care of our merge. And if this was not the case, meaning if we didn't have any overlaps, all we need to do is to add our current interval to our result, just like we saw on the slides. We literally said we're going to copy paste it inside of our result. So we're going to say result.push current interval like so. And then when we're done, our current interval is going to change just like we saw on the slides. Each time we added our current interval to our result array, our current interval changed. So we're going to say current interval is going to be equal to next interval, so we can explore the next possibilities. And then at the end, our current interval is going to have the last interval inside of it, but because it's the last one, we're not going to be able to compare it with anything, so it's not going to be added to our result inside of our for loop. So at the end, after our for loop is done, we're going to say result.push current interval, and this is going to add the last interval to our result, and we're going to return result like so. This is going to be all of our code. I hope I have not made any typos. Let's run it and see if we're going to get accepted. Moment of truth, and yep, we got accepted. Now let's submit it and see if we're going to pass all of the test cases. And yep, we got accepted. That's awesome. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and keep on coding.